On today's video, I'm going to share with you what are the essential items that you're going to need when you start home brewing. Hi, I'm Darryl Smith and I'm a home brewer in the UK. On my channel, I share with you my experiences of home brewing. I've been asked a few times to share with you what gear I use. I've had a few questions about the fact that I use gas burners in my kitchen as opposed to using an electrical system. So I'm going to share with you my most essential items that I use when I'm home brewing. The most important part of your brewing, you could probably say, is going to be your kettle. It's certainly one of the biggest costs, certainly initially. I mean, you can spend less than £100 or you can spend thousands of pounds on whatever brewing kettle you go for. I use the brew in the bag method, which is quite a cheap method. It also requires less equipment compared to other styles, and as I don't have much space in my home, it works really well for me to limit how many things I have to store, and it stops my partner questioning my hobby too much. This is a really simple kettle that I brought a few years ago now from the Malt Miller in the UK. It's not very flashy, but it does everything I need it to. I paid a bit extra when I brought this and got a thermometer built into it. I'd sooner it have been a bit lower. They do that on their newer models now, put it lower down. This is kind of obsolete for the Malt Miller. They've really upped their game now. They've got some amazing looking kettles, which I would really love to have a go with sometime. This is as basic as you can get. This is a 50-litre kettle. To be honest, I probably should have got a 35-litre one. If anything, this is a bit too big. Benefit of it being bigger is that when I put it onto my hob, I can actually use 2 hob rings on it. So probably heats up my water quicker, but then if I had a smaller system, then maybe it would heat up just as fast. Not 100% sure on the science there, but I can get 2 burners on this, which does help speed things up. I brought this back when gas wasn't as expensive as it is now, so I am considering getting an electric system in the next few years. Certainly when my energy bills start shooting up, I should probably start considering changing how I brew. So if you're thinking of doing it the way that I do, just take into consideration that when I brought this, gas was nowhere near as expensive as it is now. If you're after a more advanced system, you know, if you really know that you're going to take this hobby seriously and so you can plow in more money at the start, then you could look into like Grainfather or Brewzilla systems. If you're in the US, then it looks like the Clawhammer supply system is the one to go for. Loads of people absolutely love that. I mean, loads of YouTubers use it. It is on the pricier side, but it is built beautifully. They've got an amazing YouTube channel, which if you've somehow not seen and you've watched this one, you should really have a look at their videos because they are the best at this kind of thing. Those more advanced systems, they give you a more controlled brew day. It feels a little less involved, I suppose. You know, maybe this is a bit more old school in feeling, so a lot more can go wrong. Temperature control is really quite difficult with this. You know, you're constantly having to adjust your gas burners, so you've got much less consistency when you're brewing using a system like this. It is probably your biggest decision that you're going to have to make, is what kettle you end up using. I've had really great results using this pretty cheap system. I will one day upgrade, but for the time being, this works out really well for me. And yeah, couldn't have been happier with it. I'd argue that the next most important thing when it comes to home brewing is sanitizing, keeping everything clean. Once you know what your kettle's like, let's work out how we're going to keep it clean. There's loads of different cleaning products out there. PBW's really popular for cleaning equipment, but I have found that products like the Pink Stuff and OxyClean, so long as you're not using ones that are scented, you can absolutely use them to clean your brewing equipment, and you know, you won't risk infection or anything like that. These are really powerful cleaners and they don't make anything smell funny, so they don't alter the taste of your beer. I also use these scrubbing pads. These are Scrub Daddy ones. These are really quite abrasive, but they don't like damage my kettle, which is obviously really important when it comes to cleaning metal. I use Chemsan. I started using Chemsan when, I think because of Brexit in the UK, it became really hard to get a hold of Starsan. I've just carried on using this because it does exactly the same thing. It is a bit cheaper. Certainly last time that I brought this, it felt cheaper, and I can get it easier. So yeah, you need to use this. You need to be good at cleaning to be good at brewing. You need to obsessively clean absolutely everything to become a good brewer. It's no good if you can come up with fantastic recipes, but you keep infecting them because you're not cleaning things properly. I try and clean everything before I use it, and then I re-clean it after I've used it. So everything kind of ends up getting cleaned twice. That helps avoid the risk of infection. But yeah, cleaning is really, 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 really important. And if you're not going to bother cleaning your products properly, you might as well not bother brewing. Still on the subject of cleaning, I find that using a fermenting bucket with my sanitizer in it is really useful for just chucking things in that need to be left to sanitize. I have loads of these builder buckets. They're only £1 each. They're good for like putting in spent grain, or for cleaning things inside of, or just storing things. Get a few of these and have at least one spare fermenting bucket so that you can, you know, again, store stuff in it or use it for cleaning items whilst you're brewing. A couple of other important things for cleaning are brushes. This bottle brush probably needs replacing now, but this is for cleaning bottles further down the line. I've also used this for cleaning parts like here. You know, get in and clean everything properly. And this is quite useful for, you know, getting around the hard parts. But basically you need loads of these to clean everything. So get lots of brushes. You can buy multi-packs of these in various shapes and sizes so you can get to everywhere and clean everything thoroughly. Cleaning is vitally important, as I've already said. So once everything's clean and you're starting to get ready to brew, if you're doing the brew in a bag method, then you're going to need a bag. I've tried maybe 3 or 4 different styles now, and I've had issues in the past where they've broken. If you watched some of my earlier videos, you would have seen that I used a double bag because I had 2 bags that I didn't really trust. But I've recently found this one on eBay. I'll put a link to it in the description. I'll put a link to all of the products that I use in the description to this video. But this is the toughest one that I've found. It's handmade. This easily fits in my 50-litre kettle. I've been really happy with this one so far. You're gonna want to use a thermometer of some description. I found this one to be really useful. I think it's one that's originally for like testing meat, you know, one that you would stab into meat. I got it for £5. It works perfectly fine when I put it in the water and test the temperature of the water. I have found occasional use for this laser thermometer. Benefit to this is that I'm not having to touch anything when I'm using it. So when I'm like checking the temperature of my fermented beer, when I'm bottling it, I don't have to stick anything in that liquid to see what the temperature of that beer is. I can just use one of these. You know, you can see it's telling me how hot I am right now. I'm apparently 29 degrees, that seems warm. Because I do the brew in the bag method, I sometimes need to obviously lift the bag out of the beer. Some people use winches, but I don't have that capability because I'm brewing above a vent so that my kitchen isn't filled with water and my paint peels. So yeah, I've got these brewer's gauntlets, which are absolutely fantastic. I have never found the bag to be too hot that I can't lift it out using this, and it's been an absolute lifesaver. The few times that I tried doing the lift without gauntlets were pretty much impossible. You know, you got a brew bag that's, say, 70 degrees and it's going to burn your hands. These are vital for brewing the bag brewers. Linked to those gauntlets is this colander. This is the colander that I use to put it over my brewing kettle and then put my bag on and allow it to drain into the wort. This is from IKEA. I think it was pretty cheap. It's been amazing. It's way stronger than it looks. You know, I've done double IPAs with this, like with an 8 kilogram malt bill, and this has been able to withstand it absolutely fine. It's slightly bent in places, but it's working, and if it breaks, I can get another one because they're really cheap. Something else you're gonna need is a big spoon. These come in handy throughout the brewing process. And I also have this little paddle. This is a dirt cheap mash paddle. I should probably upgrade this with something a bit stronger to possibly help increase my mash efficiency, but I've used this in every single brew so far and it's been perfectly fine. So that you can test the strength of your beer, you're going to need to have a hydrometer and a trial flask. This is a very clever device which measures the gravity of your beer before and after you have brewed. This measures the gravity and so the alcohol content of your beer before it's fermented and after fermented, and then there's a sum that helps work out what your alcohol content is. This actually came with my very first brew kit, which got me addicted to the hobby, and I think I'm the only person that I'm aware of who hasn't broken one of these yet. I think this is full of beads which will explode everywhere on the day when it inevitably breaks. These are glass, so I don't know how I've not broken this. You also need a trial jar, which this will go in. It floats up and you can use it to test your gravity. I can explain how that works on a different video. Another area that you can spend all sorts of money on when it comes to home brewing is your fermenter. I mean, you can go really cheap and use a fermenting bucket, or you can use very expensive stainless steel products, which of course will give you better results, but their initial cost is quite high compared to something like this, or this. Depends on what you fancy, really. The benefit of using a fermenting bucket like this particular one is that you have got a tap. You could pour your fermented beer straight out of this into, say, your bottles, or into another bucket, or into a keg, depending on what your setup's like. I actually tend to opt for this particular bucket. I've been quite happy with it. The one before, I've had leak a couple of times from the tap. That could be a problem with me rather than the product, though. Normally when you buy a bucket like that, a lid comes with it. I find that some of them, their grommets, which is this little bit, some of them, their grommets aren't particularly good, so I have brought a couple of packets of spare grommets, which seem to give a better seal when you put in your airlock. This is one of my airlocks. They're pretty simple. It doesn't matter too much about their design. You generally put sanitizer inside of these, or you can put, say, a neutral alcohol like vodka into it, and this is to help stop bugs and nasties getting into your beer. It also helps avoid any oxygen or air coming into your beer, because you want there to be as much CO2 protecting your fermenting wort as you can. As a home brewer, you're going to end up with loads of various tubes. It depends on what items you're using. I have a tube that connects to my kettle when I'm home brewing, but I have these for like blow-off tubes. That's a slightly more advanced thing for if you're brewing something like Kveik yeast, which is so active that a normal airlock is no good. You're going to end up with lots of various tubes. You could just go and buy loads of different sizes and shapes and just hope that you've always got the right ones to hand. That's one idea, or you just buy them when you need them, really. These are dirt cheap and they're on Amazon and eBay quite available. An alternative to using a fermenting bucket is a demijohn. The benefits of a demijohn is that they're much smaller. This is a UK gallon, which is about 5 litres. With a demijohn, you've got a bung, which you put in with your airlock so that it all becomes tight. I still use my demijohns when I'm maybe brewing a very small batch of something. My cider experiments generally tend to be inside demijohns so that I'm not making massive batches. I've also done split batches using these. There's loads of benefits to having the capability to do small brews. You can get plastic demijohns. Lots of people have had issues with these shattering. They're much less tough compared to their plastic counterparts, as you can expect when you're dealing with glass, but certainly when you're starting off, maybe your first ever 1 or 2 brews will be in one of these so that you're keeping costs down very low. And if you're certainly using, say, pots and pans in your own kitchen with a little brew kit, then one of these is going to be absolutely fine when you start off. You'll need some scales for when you're measuring out grains. These are just simple kitchen scales, which are perfectly fine for measuring out quantities of malt. And hops, most of the time, you can use micro scales, but I think micro scales aren't vital. It's certainly something to consider when you start going a bit more advanced. But early on, any scales that are in your kitchen are going to be perfectly fine for home brewing. You're going to need some scissors. I mean, you should have some in your house, but it's a good idea to have some set aside specifically for home brewing so that when you're doing your brew day, you can always find your scissors. Some other little things that you might need is a funnel. This is certainly useful for if you're filling your demijohn or if you're just cleaning it. You can buy packs of these with lots of different sizes, which can come into various uses. So yeah, good to have some of these. It's also a good idea to have a few of these little clamps. These are another really cheap item, but they're really useful for, say, making sure that your grain bag doesn't fall into your brew. Just by hooking them round your kettle. I've found loads of different uses for these, and £1 for 4 has been absolutely brilliant. As I do brew in the bag, I have found that using a thick blanket has been really helpful for when I'm doing my mashing, because I can throw this over the kettle and it really does help contain the heat. I've before in the past forgotten to put the blanket on, and I've really noticed a huge drop in the temperature of the kettle. Get yourself a nice thick blanket. This one is from a service station. Just get a nice thick one and make sure when you put it on the kettle that there are no burners on, okay? The only chemical I would probably suggest that you start using as soon as possible is Campton tablet. These are really useful for getting rid of chlorine, and you can put them into your water before you start heating it up to mash. You know, you can be getting all your other items ready whilst you're leaving the water to do so, because you need to leave it for about 30 minutes and then all the chlorine's gone. It has a huge quality effect on your beer. So yeah, do this really early on. So that's really all the basic stuff that I use when I'm home brewing. That's all the stuff that would get you going. There's also lots of other things that I use in a brew day now, like my pH meter. I use various salts for treating my water, and I use a cooling coil and a hop spider, but these are all things that feel like they're kind of the next step up, and I'll look at them in a different video. I've just gone over what are the basic things that will get you started when you're doing the brew in the bag method. Don't overcomplicate your first few brews. Don't do brew number 2 and start worrying about your pH. Just try and learn the technique. The technique and process is the most important thing to learn early on. Don't get too bogged down into worrying about if you've got the right equipment or not. You know, this kettle is cheap and it's served me so well, and I've just bought little bits and pieces over the years to make it better. Like my pH meter is a big game changer, but I really have only just started using it to my full benefit, and I really think it may have confused me early on, so don't get yourself stressed. I've also not covered bottling here or kegging. Again, I think that's a different video, and there's different items that you need for that. But these are all the main items you really need for your actual brew day. Thank you for watching this video. As I say, there will be a couple of other equipment videos in the future. But these are just the basics that you need for when you start brewing with the brew in the bag method. In the description, there'll be a link to every one of the items that I've talked about in this video. It'll either be the one that I actually own or something very close to it, which I recommend. So do check those out, and thank you so much for watching this video. I'll certainly be doing a couple of other videos talking about equipment in the future. Cheers! I haven't got a beer to, I normally finish on a beer.